All right, everyone, I think we'll go ahead and get started for today. So good morning and welcome. Thank you for attending the second town hall in our series, where we will talk about COVID-19 clinical trials. My name is Jessica McGee. I'm a member of the Blackfeet tribe, and I am a project associate here at the Urban Indian Health Institute, also known as UIHI, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Today is also Earth Day, and we've put together a short trivia for you to answer. So please use the link on the screen or the one that was sent in the chat to participate. Everyone who participates will be entered into a raffle to win a giveaway prize. Today, we will be giving away our limited edition vaccination masks that you can see in the picture, and also some decolonizing data stickers. To explain more about UIHI and our mission and the purpose of this town hall, I will pass us off to Dr. Rosalina James. She will also do our land acknowledgement this morning.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rose James. I'm the Director for Evaluation and Research with the Urban Indian Health Institute, Tsitsiagwak. And I welcome you to our webinar town hall today. The Urban Indian Health Institute is a division of the Seattle Indian Health Board, and we are a tribal epidemiology center that serves urban Indian organizations, over 60 organizations that serve American Indian and Alaska Native people across the country. And we are delighted to have our guests speak and share their knowledge today. I'm going to take a moment right now to first acknowledge the people of this land that Seattle Indian Health Board has the honor to share, the Duwamish and the Coast Salish people. And we thank you all for joining us, and really hope that we can share important information with everybody as we navigate unprecedented times.
Thank you, Rose. We also want to share with you all our agenda for this event and let you know that we will be recording this town hall so that we can share it on our website for those who were unable to make it today. So as you can see from our agenda, we will introduce our panelists before going into our topics for today. We will also have a Q&A section towards the end before we close. To create a good environment for us today, we also want to begin with a blessing. So I will also pass it off to Rose once again to open us up.
Haishka, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, dear Creator, we ask that you look over our Indigenous and Native people as we seek to understand the lessons that we should be learning in facing this extraordinary sickness and challenging times. Many haishkas for each day that we wake to hug our children and laugh with our parents, celebrate the lives of our people, and have the opportunity to appreciate the gifts of the land and the life all around us. We thank you for the bounty of knowledge and wisdom that our relatives and friends are here today to share. And we ask that you bless this discussion today, and that we all open our minds and hearts and learn something that helps us help our people. Amen.
Thank you, Rose. I do want to say that this is a town hall, so we would love interaction from our audience today. And to help facilitate that, we can go over some quick ground rules. So one way we operate in a good way is to ensure that this is a respectful place for knowledge sharing. We want all of you to feel safe in asking questions and sharing your thoughts. So things like offensive speech, spreading false information, or harassing our community will not be accepted. So that you all know how to participate in this town hall, for those on Zoom, as you can see, there are two icons on the bottom of your Zoom screen. The chat feature is for all of you to use throughout the town hall as you wish. So feel free to share your stories, your thoughts, and your knowledge as you're listening along. The Q&A feature on the left is for all of your questions. So throughout the town hall, as you hear from our panelists, please share any questions that come to mind. We will address them during the Q&A portion. And if you are watching on Facebook Live today, please feel free to leave your questions in the comment section, and someone from our team will make sure that they get to us. Now that you all know how to submit questions, we just want to note that the information shared in this town hall is to help inform everyone today and provide resources for our community, but this does not substitute professional medical advice, consultations, and treatments. So now, without further ado, let's introduce you to all of our panelists for today. Our first panelist is Candace Wilson, who is a member of the Lummi Nation. She is the executive director of the Lochtimish Foundation, formerly known as Lummi Nation Service Organization, a tribally chartered 501c3 nonprofit. She holds a bachelor's degree in tribal governance and business management from Northwest Indian College and is currently pursuing her master's in public administration at Seattle University. Thank you, Candace, for being here with us today. Our second panelist is Chloe Hurley, a member of the Navajo Nation. Chloe received her BSN degree from the University of New Mexico. She is a research nurse for Johns Hopkins Center of American Indian Health in Fort Defiance, Arizona, located on the Navajo Nation. They work in partnership with tribal communities to design public health programs that raise the health statuses, self-sufficiency, and health leadership of Native people to the highest possible level. Chloe has also worked on the COVID-19 Pfizer vaccine trials within the Navajo Nation, as well as COVID-19 convalescent plasma trials. So welcome, Chloe. Thank you for being here with us today. And our third panelist for today is Dr. Rachel Bender-Ignacio, who is an infectious disease physician scientist. She was raised on Spokane and Coeur d'Alene land and received an early education that emphasized respect and connections to the local land and its native peoples. She received her medical degree and Master's of Public Health and Epidemiology at University of Washington and continued her training in internal medicine at Mass General Hospital, Harvard, serving briefly on faculty there. She then returned to UW for an infectious diseases fellowship, where the majority of her patient care and research has focused on the intersections between co-infections, HIV outcomes, and cancer. Since the start of the pandemic, she and her team at ACTU have pivoted to focus on COVID-19 treatments and addressing overlapping care and access in COVID-19 and HIV. So thank you as well for being here with us today. To kick us off, we will first take the time to hear from our panelists about their firsthand experiences with COVID-19 clinical trials. And to our attendees, please also feel free to share your own experiences using the chat feature. We would love to take the time to hear from you about your personal experiences as well. So the first question we have today is, what work or experience do you have with COVID-19 treatments, vaccines, or clinical trials so far? And let's start with Chloe today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chloe Hurley. I'm a research nurse for Johns Hopkins. I am Navajo. My experience with COVID-19 vaccine started with the vaccine trial with the Pfizer study here on the Navajo Nation. We started with a community hospital of Chinle, Arizona, and then gradually moved on to our other sites, Shiprock, White River, and then Gallup area. We've also started working with the convalescent plasma study here on the Navajo Nation, but the main project that we did was the Pfizer vaccine study.
Great, thank you so much for sharing with us. Next, we will pass it off to Dr. Bender-Ignacio. The same question, what work or experience do you have with COVID-19 treatments, vaccines, or clinical trials so far?
My main focus has been COVID-19 treatments. At the beginning of the pandemic here at the University of Washington, I had the chance to co-lead 2 inpatient clinical trials for people who were hospitalized. And then we kind of quickly pivoted to try to focus on the outpatient clinical trials, knowing that the tip of the iceberg are the people who are hospitalized. And the big goal obviously is to keep people out of the hospital and keep people safe. So we established this COVID Clinical Research Center here at the Hutch, where I am today, at the Fred Hutch Cancer Research Center in Seattle. I direct a standalone COVID Clinical Research Center here, which has several clinical trials as well as observational studies. And I'm also part of the Active 2 program, which is part of the United States government COVID-19 research response, and is the outpatient treatment study that's part of this national NIH-led response, and is a big platform trial, which is available throughout the United States, and actually just yesterday opened in South Africa and a couple locations in Latin America too.
Great, thank you again for sharing. Next up, we will have Candace share her experience.
Ait sgwael, siam nasjalacha siam quanstanat sanasnat. Good morning, friends and family. I am Candace Wilson from Lummi Nation. I am proud and honored to be here today, and I want to thank each and every one of you and those that are listening in or able to later on, but the fellow panelists as well. Gratitude and appreciation for my relative, Dr. Rose James, who is a descendant of the Duwamish people and the Lummi people. So, Haishka Siam. My experiences with the vaccines and the treatment and has been from the personal perspective. And what I'll share today is the experiences that my family has gone through for COVID-19 positive, and then the treatment for the monoclonal antibody infusion for recovery of COVID-19. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Candace. Thank you all of you for sharing. We also want to get a sense of what our audience thinks about when they hear about COVID-19 clinical trials. So we'll be taking a short 5-minute break. And if you haven't already, please take a minute during the break to answer the following question that we have posted using the link that we have on the screen or just posted in the chat. And we will see you back in about 5 minutes for a short break.
So we're on break.
Yeah, we'll be back in about 5 minutes. So let's just call it 9:23 Pacific time.
Thank you. I do not know who else is signed on to my account.
All right, as we welcome everyone back from the break, we did want to share the word cloud and the comments that were generated from the survey question that we made available. So on the screen is some examples of some of the answers that were submitted to our question. What comes to mind when you think of COVID-19 clinical trials? Once again, thank you everyone for participating. Looks like we got quite a few answers. I see wellness in there. I see vaccines, lots of good answers and thoughts and knowledge being shared today. All right, so we'll go ahead and move into our next section for today. How clinical trials work. So we've compiled a few questions for our panelists to guide today's discussion about clinical trials. Our first question will go to Chloe Hurley, and the question we have is, what is the clinical trials process?
With clinical trials, in my experience with Johns Hopkins, there's 3 phases. In the first phase, normally a traditional phase, the first phase will take anywhere from 12 months to about 18 months. And that's just usually about 100 people or maybe less, to where they test the safety and whether the body can tolerate whatever product, in this case, the Pfizer vaccine. The next phase usually takes up to 2 years, where they assess the immune system and how it responds and how they're monitoring safety. This one usually contains a few hundred to a few thousand people. The last phase usually takes up to 2 or more years, where they involve thousands of people and how well the product is working in preventing infections or how it reduces the severity of the disease. But regarding to COVID, none of these phases were skipped. Instead of having it over a long period of time of more than about 5 years, usually a study, it was more condensed to where it overlapped in each phase. So once the phase started, and after they collected safety data and analyzed, it then began the next phase. So that's how the COVID vaccine came about so quickly.
Thank you for sharing, Chloe. Our next question we have is for Dr. Bender Ignacio, and our question we have is, how are clinical trials monitored for safety?
A great question, Jessica. There are several different layers that make sure that we keep people safe. So the amount of oversight, clinical oversight at the local level for a trial depends on what the risk is perceived. So for example, if we are in a phase 1 or the first phase of the trials, as Chloe just explained, then those are monitored very frequently. Sometimes we see our participants every day, or we call them every day and check in. Sometimes we give people blood pressure monitors and oxygen monitors to take home, and we get alerted if somebody's vital signs are not normal. We always provide people with a 24-hour emergency line that goes directly to, for example, myself or one of the other physicians on the trial, to make sure that people have access to us, questions, concerns, text messages for things that are less urgent. we just really want to make sure that access is there so that people who are experiencing anything good or bad or worrisome can be in touch with us. When we move into these later phase trials that Chloe mentioned, we're a little bit less hands-on with people because at that phase, we already know that these treatments are safe for the most part. And so maybe we see people less often or communicate with them less often. We take less blood. There are less of these sort of monitoring locally. Then on top of that, we keep very close records. We document everything very carefully, and there's rules for reporting anything bad that happens so that if somebody is hospitalized, whether it's related to the study or not, let's say somebody just was hit by a car, unfortunately, while they happen to be participating in a trial, we have to report these things immediately so that if there's a safety signal that emerges, like the pause that happened with the AstraZeneca vaccine or the J&J vaccine, that the authorities, the FDA and the NIH knows about these things immediately. We also have an organization monitoring us and making sure that we are doing everything safely, and there's a whole reporting structure of safety. So again, it starts with our participants and having this very close communication with our participants and making sure that they have access to us and can trust us to report anything that they're concerned about. And then depending on how severe it is that they're reporting, we have to report immediately all the way up to the very top so that if something emerges that we need to take action on, like pausing enrollment or stopping treating people, that we can all in a coordinated way make sure that effort gets underway very quickly and that we alert everybody involved so that we can continue to have the safest practices.
Great, thank you for sharing that with us. We'll actually stick with you for our next question as well. And we'll just ask, what are some of the common reasons that people join clinical trials?
I think for the most part, COVID aside, most people join clinical trials for altruism, for that feeling of, well, maybe this may or may not help me. It's experimental. Many of these trials are randomized to a placebo, meaning, there might be a 50% chance or a 25% chance that the individual coming into the study isn't actually going to get anything besides salt water. And that even if they get the active product, it may not even work for them. But I think most people come into clinical trials knowing that they're helping advance science, helping advance their community so that if it's their sister that gets sick next or their neighbor, that maybe there will be a treatment or maybe there'll be a vaccine available for them. I think we have seen a little bit of a shift during COVID where people have been coming to clinical trials, both for vaccines and for treatments, because there aren't other approved options. So at the beginning, before we had approved options for people who are hospitalized, before we had approved vaccines, and even now when we don't have approved treatments for people who are not at very high risk for hospitalization, meaning who aren't eligible for some of these monoclonal antibodies, people come into the trial because they think, well, I could have a 50% chance of something that helps me personally because there's nothing else that could help me. And so we've actually seen that some of these trials are providing access in a way that clinical care, regular clinics haven't been able to provide access to treatments because things are just moving so fast. So I think that's something that's maybe a little bit new, not unique to COVID, but I would say we hear more people and see more people coming to us because they personally are worried that they don't have another option. But I think that the altruism and sort of doing this for their neighbor, for their community, for someone else in the future is a very strong motivator.
Yes, thank you again for sharing. As a follow-up to that question, we do have one that we'd like to pose to Chloe. And we just wanted to know, are these reasons different than the reasonings that you've seen among Native people and their reasons for participating?
No, I've kind of noticed majority of the people that signed up within our communities, they are there to help the community members. I think a lot of the people that signed up were kind of just like help protecting their elders and the people, the family members and stuff like that. So And then some people I know when they sign up, they're making comments like, I want to be able to travel again. I want to be able to do this and that again. So I would agree on some of the reasons why people do sign up for these clinical trials, is to basically help their community. And then a few of our participants, they were in the Johns Hopkins study before, so they were like, yeah, I want to help. I want to help to make sure that this vaccine works towards our community and the Native Americans.
Great, thank you. The next question we have will actually pose to all of our panelists today. Have any of you ever participated in a clinical trial? And let's start with Candace first.
So I myself have not participated in the trials, but I have advocated and lobbied our leadership to provide the access to my mother. And I'll share my story. At the end of the year, the nation received the vaccinations, and we were reaching out to our elders and those that were highly susceptible of COVID-19 with either acquiring it or their health conditions, such as our elders. So when they started to contact the elders, my mom was a little bit hesitant of receiving the vaccine, but she, asked all the right questions and took her time to decide whether she was going to vaccinate. And throughout COVID-19, she was trying to practice all the social distancing and hand washing and masking up and staying home. It was a challenge for her because she likes to go out and about and, do her own thing and check on family and take care of her own errands. Well, going into the, so the third day is that middle picture there of her, or the one that has mom, and she's in that light colored blue shirt. And she was, that third day, she was like, she felt like she was in jail. And mom, you're doing the right thing. You're doing what you need to do. And so, throughout the year, everything was going good with, staying away from COVID-19. Well, when she did decide to receive the vaccine, it was the end of the year. We went to the Lummi Indian Health Center to get her vaccine. We met with the nurse and she had questions of him and he answered them, and he gave us a little bit of time. And my sister and I were with her when she decided to get the vaccine. And she said, okay, she'll take the vaccine. So we asked him to come back in. He gave her the vaccine and we were on our way. She was okay. There was nothing wrong. And her symptoms, didn't have any symptoms at all. But unfortunately, 7 to 10 days later, she acquired COVID-19. And so somewhere in the timeline before the vaccine, I believe she was exposed already to COVID-19 and she had received the shot. Well, my mom is a lung cancer survivor. She had stage 4 and she had it surgically removed, the cancer tumor. And she has health problems. And it was scary. It was scary for the family that she had acquired it. And A few days before we had discovered that she was positive, I had heard about the monoclonal antibody infusion and not knowing very much about it, but knowing that it helps with the symptoms of those that are positive. And so when I knew and understood that we may have this available at our clinic, I started to ask for the treatment for her. And the scheduling was difficult, but they said it won't be available to her for another day or two, maybe 2 or 3. And at that time, I was like, well, the discovery of the symptoms for my mom came on rapidly, and it was scary. She went to bed the night before with the chills and aches and pains, feeling uncomfortable, and woke up the next morning and she was worse. And that's when we contacted the clinic, and a nurse came out and did a rapid testing. And within 15 minutes, we were aware that she was COVID-19. And so knowing how fast it came on for my mom and the little bit that I did know about the monoclonal antibody, I went to see my mom regardless of her having COVID-19, but I gowned up, mask and shield, gloves. I went to see my mom, and I could tell she was starting to feel sick. And I said, well, I have to do something. And I started to ask about the monoclonal antibody. And when I was told it may be 2 or 3 days, that's when I said, I have to ask counsel for support and advocacy to get her it immediately. And they just happened to be in a Zoom meeting for the council that day. And I had found the link and joined the council meeting. And they just finished up one update and was moving on to the next. And I asked for their time and shared with them the situation and asked for support to get her the access right away, whether it was at our healthcare facility or at another nearby medical institution that could provide it. And the desperation for lobbying for my mother was the fact that she was a lung cancer survivor, stage 4, and it just come on too fast. So that was in January. And it's been 90 days now. And she's actually, yes, the other day, Tuesday, she received her 2nd dose of her vaccine. So it took her a while to recover from COVID-19, but I believe the monoclonal antibody infusion really helped her recover, even though she did continue to have some discomfort, and it took a little while to recover, but she's doing much better now. And those other pictures in there are, the one in the middle was when she received the monoclonal antibody treatment, and I was praying with her at her house. And then the one on the right was last year around this time when I brought her those geraniums. And then the other one is the one on the left was for her birthday. But from my own experience, I really believe in the access to this type of treatment for our communities, and would do it all over again if I had to, because it helps save lives.
Thank you so much, Candace, for sharing that story with us and also letting us see these beautiful pictures of your mother.
Thank you.
Next, we'll pass it off to Dr. Bender Ignacio. Have you ever participated in a clinical trial yourself?
I have, not with as much emotion and as the story you've just told us, Candace. I really, part of hearing stories like yours and your mother's is what inspires me to do this work, is to help people not have that worry and fear that their loved one is going to get very sick or that something terrible will happen, and to be able to provide that access quickly during this very scary time. So I'm sort of speechless at this moment, just absorbing your story.
Thank you.
But yes, I have participated myself in a clinical trial for actually for a herpes vaccine before COVID happened. So a different experimental vaccine.
Great, thank you for sharing. And Chloe, did you want to answer the same question as well?
For me, I have not yet participated in a clinical trial. I've had family members and close friends that have participated in past studies. But for me personally, I have not.
All right, thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists for sharing. We will continue our clinical trials conversation with a few more directed questions for our panelists. So the first question we have is for Chloe. How do you reassure people who are hesitant to join COVID-19 clinical trials?
From my experience, it's just with the COVID, it was a lot of reassuring, educating, making sure that people that were hesitant know the vaccine. I think a lot of the questions were like, what is in the vaccine? Why did it go so fast? And why is it not? One of the people that we were doing a vaccine, mass vaccine distribution one time had told me, if this is not FDA approved, why are you guys giving it? And I just kind of reassured her and re-educated her, letting her know that it was on the authorized for early use, emergency use, and kind of just gave her more information on why it kind of went as fast as it did. So a lot of the underlining hesitancy of the COVID is this mainly reassuring, educating the participants, letting them know, like, you have all this time, you can take all the information you want, take it home, study it, ask questions, and just letting them know that it's voluntary. They're not forced to join. They can stop at any time. But I think the majority of it was just giving them all the information that they need, answering whatever questions that they have.
Great, thank you so much for speaking on that. Next up, we have a question for Candace. Our question is, what do you wish you knew about COVID-19 treatments beforehand?
The COVID-19 treatments beforehand that would have been helpful is I guess from experiences, not just with my mom and some of my relatives who are actually in the clinical trials here, is that I can't even speak to that personally for my relatives that are in the clinical trials, other than what I experienced with my mother for the monoclonal. I'm just glad that I found out in time for her to receive the monoclonal antibodies infusion. And then I do know that it has helped at least 30 other people in our community that have received the monoclonal antibody infusion, and that none of them that have received it, these are the ones that are COVID-19. The ones that have received it, none of them have been hospitalized. So that is a big difference, because the ones that weren't able to get it right away, we did have some community members hospitalized, and we did lose some of our community members to COVID-19. But I think if we just had known sooner, it would have helped maybe prevent lives, the loss of lives that we had to experience. But now that we do have it, I believe it has helped a lot with the prevention of hospitalization, and it has saved lives.
Thank you again for sharing. Next up, we have a question for Dr. Bender Ignacio. And the question we have is, how do you communicate consent to volunteers in the clinical trial?
So I think, Chloe talked about this as well, but consent, I think people often misunderstand consent as a piece of paper that you sign. And consent is really supposed to be a process. It's supposed to be a conversation. The way I like to do consent, if there's time, is to give the person reading materials the consent forms in their language, in English or another language, to read ahead of time, to read through it, to be able to generate questions for people who may not be able to read it themselves for whatever reason. I like to read it together and stop, take as long as we need, stop on any points that people have. And then remind people that even if they choose to sign the form and participate in the study at any moment, they can stop the study at any point. So we had a woman, for example, who came in to see us, who signed the form. And when she came in the next day, she knew that she might get one of 3 different treatments, 3 different experimental treatments or a placebo. And in the moment when she found out which of the treatments she was assigned by the computer randomization, she said, I'm just too nervous to have this one. I would have been okay, but I just don't want to go forward. And so we sat with her, we showed her the treatment, we talked about it, we answered all of her questions. And then, after an hour, she still said, no, I'm not comfortable. And so we said, okay, we will, give you the meal we promised you today, because you're in the clinic for many hours. So you still get lunch, we still pay you, we still cover your parking, all of these things, and we'll thank you for being here today, but you can go home, and we don't have any bad feelings that you didn't take the treatment, and that's okay. Because consent isn't just that piece of paper, it's that conversation. And so for people who are in a trial for a year or a year and a half following up, even if they aren't getting any more treatments, maybe the treatment was just a one-time monoclonal infusion on that first day of the study, they can choose to stop at any time. And we give people options where we can say, you can stop, but we keep your data. We keep using the information that you've given us so that it can help other people and help science move along, that you still contribute what you did, even though you stopped early. Or people can completely withdraw their data. They can ask us to destroy the blood samples that they have. They can completely withdraw. So I think we give people lots of options and make sure that it's an ongoing conversation. The other thing that's important is that if anything changes in the trial during the course of the trial, for example, this Active 2 trial, or Rise Above COVID, it's an adaptive study, which means it's moving at the speed that the pandemic is. So when new treatments are potentially available, when they go through those early phase trials, they can get added to our protocol. Sometimes we find out that particular things like collecting blood to measure the virus in the blood is not that useful. So we want to stop collecting that blood, or maybe we want to get a few extra swabs. We ask our participants to sign a new consent form anytime that happens, even if it's just collecting one more tube of blood, or maybe even if it's not collecting nasal swabs anymore, or if the visits are more frequent than they were originally going to be, or if we'd like to do a physical exam that we didn't ask them to do originally, because we want to make sure that any of the changes that we're proposing are okay with somebody, and at any point in time they can say, no, I was comfortable with the original version, but I'm not comfortable with being in the trial the extra 6 months that are proposed. I'll stay until then, but I'd like to stop at that point. So I think it's the important thing is it is this ongoing conversation and not a piece of paper.
Great, thank you so much. For our next question, we'll pass it back to Chloe. Can you tell us a little bit about why it is important for American Indians and Alaska Natives to participate in clinical trials?
I feel like it's important just to get a good understanding of how, in this case, the COVID vaccine works among American Indian and Alaska Natives. Just understanding and knowing how for instance, if we have a vaccine that works on a certain race, but it doesn't work on Native Americans, we need to figure out what it is about the vaccine that is not being protected or not helping Native Americans have that protection against whatever vaccine is out. So I feel like it is important for Native Americans to be a part of clinical trials so that we know how well and how effective it is for our community and the people that are going to get the vaccine. And if we don't know, and if no Native Americans contribute, then we won't know how well and how effective it works. So I feel like it is very important for American Indians to participate.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. And for our last question for this section, we'll pass it back to Candace. And the question we have for you is, can you just tell us a little bit about what your hope is through all of this and what gives you strength during this time?
Yes. So through strength and resilience of who we are as Indigenous people, the Lactamish people, what we experienced here at Lummi is a little bit of hesitancy for either the vaccines or the clinical trials. Some not knowing or fear, not wanting to know, or fear of what would happen. And one of the things that we have been able to do for the Lummi community throughout the COVID-19 is the Wakalami Resilience community response, whether it was prevention, education, and awareness of COVID-19. And now it has evolved to the campaign for vaccination for a stronger nation. And then just to be able to help communicate why it's important and the stories that we have of those that have survived already, especially our elders and our loved ones. So with the vaccination campaign, we have been working on the healing the past and protecting the future. And that's to promote the vaccinations and the access for our people. We've provided thousands of vaccinations, but only about half of them within Whatcom County, half of our tribal members have vaccinated. So it is the hope that we fight COVID-19, that we understand the importance to heal the past and to protect the future. So the hope is to, for our people to understand why these are so important.
Great, thank you once again for sharing. And thank you to all of our panelists for your answers to those questions. We will now move on to the Q&A portion of our town hall. So we've dedicated this time for our community to directly ask our panelists questions about COVID clinical trials or anything else that you've heard about in today's town hall. So once again, if you have questions you would like asked, please use the Q&A icon in Zoom, or if you're watching on Facebook Live, you can put your questions into the comments. So our first question for the panelists is directed towards Chloe and Dr. Bender. And the question we have is, how are the clinical trials for COVID treatments condensed but still able to ensure safety? And we'll start with Chloe first.
Like I mentioned, how it was no phases were skipped. It was just more of overlapping each phases to where once they collected the data, the safety data that they needed, rather than ending that phase, they kind of overlap the phases and then collected all the data and then started moving into phase 2 and then phase 3. With the Pfizer vaccine, they condensed both the phase 2 and phase 3 together, and then moved on. Usually with Johns Hopkins, we mainly only work with the phase 3, but with the Pfizer vaccine, we were able to do phase 2 and phase 3 as combined, so that once they got safety data, it was okay to start doing vaccines.
Thank you. Dr. Bender Ignacio?
Yeah, I agree completely with Chloe. I think what I'll add is that what's different about COVID-19 is money and partnerships. So one of the big reasons why it often takes 5 or 10 years to go from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 is that individual pharmaceutical companies don't want to spend money with these big clinical trials. The phase 3 trials are millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars per trial. And so they don't want to make that investment if they don't think it's going to be safe and have some idea that it might work. And what happened in this case is that companies in partnership with the federal government, in many cases, again, through this, what used to be Operation Warp Speed, and now in the new administration is just called the US government COVID-19 response, gave companies enough money and created this partnership where they said, don't worry about your risk. If a vaccine, an early study doesn't work out, you stop that one, you go to the next one. We will give you that down payment to make sure that it just happens seamlessly and goes one to the other really fast. Again, not skipping any of the ethical parts or the safety parts, but it's really, I think it's really just, it's that speed. One of the other things, again, about this Rise Above COVID study, for example, is that we're testing different treatments all at the same time, and they're sharing a placebo arm, meaning that if you join this study and you're considered to be high risk, you can get treatment A, B, C, D, or E, or placebo. So it means you actually have a very low chance of getting placebo. And that same placebo arm is used across all of the different treatments. So rather than having to slowly wait to recruit, for example, we need 220 people for each phase 2 study. So instead of having to recruit 220 people separately for each different study and do it separately, we're doing it as a big partnership with the same clinical trial sites at 150 some places across the country and now internationally. You only actually have to get 110 people for each agent, because then 110 people total who get placebo can be shared and analyzed together. So it's this really cool, new, innovative way to do a clinical trial, that not only means that each person has a higher chance of actually getting the intervention, but it means that more people's data counts together and gets the trial completed faster with fewer people. So it puts fewer people at risk, fewer people with uncertainty, and gets us the answer more quickly. So these are some things that have been, I think, kind of unique to COVID.
Great, thank you again. The second question we have is directed towards, I guess, all of our panelists. So how have you used targeted communication or outreach within the Native community to recruit for clinical trials? And if so, what considerations did you use when doing so? And then I guess feel free, any one of you, to jump in.
For us, we kind of just started, I mean, there's like posters or people that, people even started calling our office before we even started recruiting, saying like, hey, is this really going to happen on the Navajo Nation? And then we kind of just took their name and their phone number. And then once we were able to do the vaccine trial, that's when we started contacting those people that were already in the running of wanting to do it. We also did a poster. They did, I think it was like announced on the radio or something like that. I don't really remember. But for me, I was mainly on the unblinded side, meaning that I was the one that was giving either the placebo or the vaccine itself. So on the blinded team, they were more involved in the recruiting side of the trials.
Thank you, Chloe. Did any one of our other panelists want to add into that question at all? All right, thank you. And we also have a follow-up question, Chloe, if you don't mind answering that one as well. Was this different for the COVID-19 clinical trials than other clinical trials?
No, a lot of times when we're out recruiting, we kind of have like a IRB approval little form that we kind of go off of. So all the trials that we're doing out of Navajo Nation has to be approved by the Navajo Nation. So if there's like a poster that has to be approved, most of the time we're usually going out in teams and recruiting. So with COVID-19, I found that a lot of people were coming or calling, like I mentioned, into the office to be a part of the trial.
I'd love to add in about a new kind of type of clinical trial that we're running here at the Fred Hutch. Technically it's international because it's here in the United States and Canada. And one of the things that's really cool about it is it's called Stop COVID-2. I don't know, Amy, if you want to share information as well about Stop COVID-2, but it's an all remote study. And so because it's an all remote study, it means that people can enroll no matter where they are. One of our big things has been access as well as recruiting, because some of these other big clinical trials have been limited to cities. You know, giving monoclonal antibodies, as Candace talked about, is hard. It takes a lot of infrastructure. It takes a lot of trained staff. And so being able to bring things to people has been very challenging. And one of the ways that we've really wanted to do that through this other trial is this all remote study where we, if you consent via an online consent, it's a secure web form conversation with one of us on the phone to walk through it. You get a package delivered to your house either by courier or overnight mail. So that means that people can participate wherever they are, even if they're not close to a health center, even if it's Saturday or something like that. And it provides not only the treatment, the pills, but also a blood pressure cuff and an oxygen monitor and temperature monitor. And so one of the things that we've been doing, because it has this amazing access for people, is working with our collaborators at the Hutch who work also have partnerships with several tribal nations and with different communities in rural places in Washington, rural Eastern Washington, and Latinx communities, for example, to be able to advertise locally this study over the radio with Facebook ads and things, because what that means is that we can bring this trial to people wherever they are, and without having to sort of have a healthcare center that's participating directly in the trial.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that.
So-
The next, oh, go ahead, Rose. Sorry.
I'd like to share how Lummi Nation, in comparison to other clinical trials research, we do have the Lummi Nation has the IRB through the Northwest Indian College. And the thing about that now is that we have our own Dr. Dakota Lane on that board with our other healthcare professionals and community representation. So they vet everything very thoroughly, and to make sure to ensure that it doesn't offend any of our teachings or culture or our traditions. So I do not know how it compares to any of those other clinical trials that we may have had access to or reviewed, but I know that our IRB takes it very seriously in protecting who we are as Lummi Nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Candace, for sharing as well. The next question we have is directed towards all of our panelists again, and I think you can all speak on this in different senses and experiences. Is there a cost or compensation for participating in trials? We'll start with Candace first, if you don't mind.
I believe there is something set up for those. Oh, for my mom, there was nothing. The reward was that it helped save her life, and the impacts of COVID-19 on her health. I apologize. And then for any of the participants here at Lummi, for the trials that we have, I do not know those conditions or what they have set up for, but I know there are some Lummi Tribal members that are signed up and going through our clinical trials here at Lummi.
Thank you. Dr. Bender Ignacio?
Yeah, so clinical trials are always compensated. It's very important for people to know that you will never ask to be that you have to pay for any of the treatments, the blood draws, or anything. It's the IRBs, as Candace were mentioning, are very careful in making sure that the payment is appropriate. We never want somebody to get so much money that they feel coerced to participate in a trial, to say like, this is so much money, I just can't pass it up. Maybe I'm nervous about this treatment or the vaccine, but this is just so much money. So when you look at the compensation, it's meant to be a small amount as a thank you for your time, as well as a compensation for the travel. So for example, it may be for a shorter visit, it may be something like $20 or $40. And for a more intense visit that takes more of your time, it might be more like $100, and paying for parking or paying for transportation, providing a meal while you're there. Again, it's really thanking you for your time in participating. If you were missing work, or just again, thank you for time and your travel and the gas that you spend. It's not meant to be a lot of money for that reason, to make sure it's ethical. And I do want to distinguish between, I think, clinical trials and the vaccines and the monoclonal treatments that are what's called EUA, or emergency use authorization. Those are still considered to be experimental because they don't have a formal FDA approval. They have this emergency conditional approval by the FDA, and those are not. You don't receive payment to get those. For the vaccines, nobody is paying for those. If you're receiving the vaccine outside of the trial, the government has, between government and health insurance, nobody pays for those. But in the monoclonal antibodies, there may be fees that are charged to insurance and things in association with having the nurse provide them, or the healthcare center. But again, that's because those are separate from a clinical trial. Those are sort of this emergency release of these new treatments. So again, people may be receiving vaccines or monoclonals on a clinical trial or in this emergency use authorization. And that's why you may be hearing different things about are you getting paid or not? There's different ways to sort of receive these early treatments or participate.
Great, thank you. Chloe, did you want to add anything on to that question as well?
Just basically what Dr. Bender-Ignacio mentioned, how participants do get compensated for their time in participating. Like she mentioned, how if they're getting blood draws or being seen in the office, they get compensated a little bit more rather than just a phone call on it, like a follow-up on how they're doing and stuff like that. So, but they do get compensated for participating in trials.
I should add one more point to that, which is also that if someone goes through the informed consent process for a clinical trial, the compensation is always listed right there on the informed consent. And there's always a section that talks about, will your insurance be billed? What happens if you get injured as a part of participating in the trial, or if you get sick because of COVID, that's not due to the trial medication. And it's all always laid out there on the informed consent, so that before anybody participates, that should be very clear that each visit is compensated at this amount of money, and your insurance will be billed, your insurance will not be billed. So all of those questions should be answered before anybody participates.
Great, thank you to all of our panelists. The next question we have is a two-part question. So the first part is, what are some common barriers for Native communities to participate in clinical trials? And then the second part is, what are some best practices for the community and research teams to address those barriers? And Chloe, if you don't mind, we'll start with you this time.
What I found is the common barriers are just basically transportation. Not only that, we have a hard time having people come to our office or trying to locate them if they don't have a cell phone, or if they give us a rural address to where it's quite a distance from our office. Another common barrier that we've come across is just their overall health, because a lot of the participants, for instance, COVID, they were supposed to not have been in contact with anybody that tested positive, or themselves were tested positive for COVID. They were automatically excluded. We tried to recruit people that had underlying conditions to find out how well the vaccines will help. So I think a lot of the barriers were just getting in contact with the participants.
Great, thank you. Dr. Bender, did you want to add anything on to that as well?
Yeah, I think that we are open and encouraging of Native communities to participate in all of these clinical trials, and I really welcome conversations about this and how we can do it better. Part of my being excited to be here today is sharing knowledge from you all back to us as to how we can provide better access to clinical trials. And again, it's many of these trials are here in places like Seattle, downtown, and we do have the ability to transport people who are COVID positive from maybe around an hour away to us, but it still is coming to a big academic institution and knowing about it and hearing about it and finding us. And so anything that I can share back to the teams that I work with, both at the Fred Hutch and also for the Rise Above COVID study. I would love to learn from you all how we can better partner and reach to communities.
So I'd like to share a few of our challenges and barriers for participation in clinical trials. If we don't have it available here, a clinical trial, I believe part of our challenge would be the travel and the distance. So it's not just about transportation, it's about the time that it takes to travel, 2 hours away. And then 2 hours there, the time it takes for the procedure for the trial, and then the time to come back. So that would take away from work time or family time, and then the money. So it's not just about a stipend. It would be about probably the mileage or the amount of time it takes for travel. So a couple considerations for those outside of the area. So for example, from Lummi, it would be the time and distance, and then the amount of money to be compensated.
Great, thank you for also sharing your personal experience with that as well.
Thank you.
So the last question we have is, are the COVID-19 treatments and vaccines that are available now still considered to be in the clinical trials process? And Dr. Bender Ignacio, if you wouldn't mind hopping in first.
So I can speak on treatments if Chloe, you want to take vaccines. What we have right now is, as Candace experienced, monoclonal antibodies are available for people who are considered to be at high risk for hospitalization. And that is kind of set up by each state as to what those requirements are, but guidance from the CDC. So that's usually people who are 65 or older, or who have underlying medical conditions. And those are have been brought forth by some of these trials and are available in some places. We just found out actually 2 days ago that one of the first one that had emergency use authorization was just, the government just pulled it back because it has limited efficacy against some of the new variants that are spreading. And it's not as powerful as some of the other new ones that have been available. So there are 2 more that have come through trials very quickly, both kind of public-private trial partnerships that are available for emergency use authorization. Again, those are for people who are at very high risk of hospitalization. And so even if we have more of those are an IV infusion. You have to go to a place where you can have a nurse put an IV in your arm and give the infusion and monitor. And so ultimately the access from those medications is difficult. You know, Candace shared the story. They said 2 or 3 days until this would be possible. And in many geographic places in the US, even here in Seattle, it's very hard to get an appointment for those. And so some of the things that we're working on are oral pills that have antiviral properties. Just thinking about, wow, what amazing power we could have to have something that your primary care doctor could call into a pharmacy, and the pharmacy could, you know, deliver to your doorstep if you're sick. So that you don't have to go travel to get it. You don't have to find a health center who has it. You don't have to get on a waiting list. And that the idea is that, you know, we've seen some early evidence that some of these treatments could work, both to decrease the amount of virus that's shed. So that's really important in protecting people in the household and people, you know, getting people back to work and school faster. And also just, again, access, something that could get prescribed by any pharmacy in the United States that your family member could pick up for you if you're in isolation at home and bring home to you, or a pharmacy could deliver. So for me, we don't have that yet. We have several of those in trials right now. One is the Stop COVID-2 trial that I mentioned, but there's several antivirals, even an inhaled treatment, which is sort of like an immune stimulant that you breathe into your lungs with a kind of nebulizer machine that's powered by USB that we're trialing to see if that can help protect the lungs from having a strong response. But again, none of these treatments are approved other than two of these monoclonal antibodies have this emergency authorization that have come from very quick enrollment in clinical trials during this past year.
Thank you so much. And Chloe, did you want to speak on the vaccines as well?
I would consider it still being in the clinical trial process because we are still in the process of collecting the data on how well and effective it is. I know that it was FDA emergency use approved, but we're just trying to figure out how it's still, how long the vaccine will work. So I would think that the vaccines, well, the Pfizer vaccine study that we're doing is still in clinical trials.
Thank you so much. And we actually had one last question come in for Candace. So Candace, the question we have is, has Lummi Nation and Loxamish Foundation used unique ways to message people who live out of the way?
To message people that live out of the way?
Yeah.
Okay. The only venue that we really use for social networking is probably Facebook. We do have a group page, the Waklami Resilience, which is particularly for Waklami Resilience Community Response. And that's a public group that we share events and activities and communicate prevention, education, awareness for the Lummi community, whether we live here at Lummi or afar. Anybody is welcome to follow that. And other than that, it's probably by word of mouth or our homepage, loxamish.org. We do have Instagram, and then we are partnering with our relatives, Children of the Setting Sun Productions, for TikTok series. So our hashtag is Waklami Resilience, and what we try to share with our community are all of the events and activities that we are doing for our community. I guess that's the best answer I can provide for that, other than our Lummi communications page, which is for Lummi Nation, and that's for everything in general, from general council meetings to other events around the nation. But our group page is targeted specifically for COVID-19 community response.
Great.
Thank you. Good question.
Yes, thank you for sharing, Candace. It looks like we have covered all the questions that we can during this time. So if your question was not able to be answered today, this is a continued series. So we've taken note of all of the questions for our future town halls. So as we near the end of our time together, we do want to share some resources for you all. You can feel free to visit our website that is on the screen, and we'll also put it in the chat as well, where you can find some of the resources that we've developed pertaining to COVID-19. So some of our resources include information about clinical trials, such as our Understanding Clinical Trials fact sheet, and questions to ask before volunteering for a clinical trial. Other resources that are available are around the currently authorized COVID-19 treatments, so more information about the monoclonal antibodies, and then other information about COVID-19 treatments can also be found at riseabovecovid.com. We will be sending out an email containing the link to our resources so that you can share with your friends, family, and community members. We also ask that you please take our very short survey and give us feedback on how we can improve our future events. Everyone who takes the short survey will once again be entered into another giveaway raffle for our vaccination masks and decolonized data stickers. There's an example of the sticker right there on the screen. And to create a good environment for us for the rest of today, we just want to end with a blessing from our traditional Indian medicine team. So I will pass it off to Lorna.
Good morning. I'm Lorna Squatimka. I'm Arrow Lakes in San Poyal. I come from the people of St. Clip. Coyote brought the Columbia River and the salmon to our people. That's how we came to be. I'm really thankful to have been invited here today. So I have a prayer on my heart and some words, and hopefully things are taken care of in the best way possible. I give thanks, Colin Chutin, for this day. I give thanks for being here in the homeland of the Duwamish people, the people of the waters, all the people of the waters, to provide any help and medicine that we can to take care of our relatives to the left and right of us. I give thanks for the waterways. I give thanks for the swimmers, the flyers, the crawlers, the four legs. I give thanks for this season, for this time of gathering and all our plants and medicines available to us, and that we learn to say our prayers and sing our songs and take care of ourselves in order to gather that medicine that is so readily available to us. I give thanks for all of the people, all of the nations that are involved in this gathering, and for their hard work and their diligence and the love of the people. I give thanks, and I ask that each and every person that has participated, that when they go to their homes, that they're loved and embraced 10 times, tenfold, as they enter their homes for the work that they do. And I give thanks to their families for sharing them with us, for their mothers, their fathers, their ancient ones, their grandmothers, their grandfathers, for their children. And I ask that no one is hungry spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, that they're prosperous in all the things that are needed to meet the needs of their own families. I give thanks also for Colin Chutin for this beautiful day. And I always say a prayer for our veterans, that their needs are met, that they're able to see their heart and minds are connected, and give thanks for their service, that we never step on or step over and disregard them in any way, that they're always fed and they have water and that they have loved ones to care for them. I give thanks for our matriarchs, for our grandmothers, for all of those before us and all of those here with us today, and all those who are not feeling well, as well as our veterans, that our hearts and the songs that are in our hearts and minds, that those go out unified to each of those elders and those matriarchs. And I ask that the matriarchs, because we are the most powerful women, women are, because we've been given the right to give birth, that we always remember our grandmothers, our ancient ones, all those before us, all those who are with us today, all those for the next 7 generations. And that we remember that if we feel alone, we're alone by choice, that we're surrounded by our matriarchs, our family, our relatives, our medicine, and that we look to the left and right of each other and make certain that we take care of each other in the best way possible. I give thanks also for the scientists, for the medicines that have brought us into the light with COVID. I pray for all of the families who have suffered loss, and that that our hearts and our life songs are with all of those to the left and right of us, to help them continue to stand, because we still have a long way to go. And I'm thankful for all of the young people, for their hearts and minds. They're the people at that age that I always wanted to be. And it took me a long time to get where I am and be a good woman. But I'm thankful when I look out and see all the young people and all the people working with their education and with their medicine. I give thanks, and I'm thankful to be a part of this. And I will be today and for all the days to come, Limna. Have a great day.
I just wanted to say a few closing words. Thank you, Haishka, Auntie Lorna, for that beautiful prayer. And I just wanted to personally thank our panelists, my relative Candace, and to your mother for letting you share this story that's so important for all of us to hear, because she loves us, because she wants to help people. Just please know that we wrap her in our blanket. And to Chloe Hurley and all of your experiences and your candid responses to our questions, you're actually helping our people open their minds to what clinical trials are and are not, and dispelling a lot of the things that people are hearing that may not be true. Coming from you has been an honor to have you on our panel. And Dr. Bender Ignacio, we thank you so much for these insights into how clinical trials work and how hard you're working as researchers and investigators, not only to create medicines and test them, but to meet the needs of people, our people included, so that we have the information we need to make our own decisions about these trials. So heal the past, protect the future. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lorna, for that blessing, and thank you, Rose, for those closing words. To everyone who attended, we also thank you, and big thanks to our panelists as well. We encourage you to stay tuned on our social media or to sign up for our bi-weekly resource email to get updates on future events. The recording of this town hall will also be available on our website and emailed to all of the participants within the next week. So once again, please don't forget to take our short survey, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Haishka.
Haishka, goodbye, everybody.